Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast, Making You an Offer You Can't Refuse. Gen Z, this is your cause. Welcome to a new year of Views of an Outsider, and we are starting off this year with a bang. A look at a cause tailor-made just for you. It's clear that Gen Z desperately wants a cause to fight for. Like pretty much every other human being throughout our entire history, young people are driven by a need to find a purpose, make a contribution, be a part of something that is bigger than themselves. Now, let's be completely honest about this. The causes that they have selected so far have all been major losers. Censoring others and trying to destroy free speech in order to make the universe a safe space. That is to naively forfeit a truly rare right that many men died to ensure that we could have, even though others in the world don't share this profound protection. And all in order to protect feelings? We need to go back to teaching children that sticks and stones may break their bones, but words can never hurt them. Then there was the cause of being able to identify as anything they wanted to. Any gender, any species, any age. Even an entirely made-up sci-fi category of their own imagination. And then fighting for the right to be able to force other people to participate in their unserious, childlike games. And, of course, there was the cause of using the rights that they didn't actually have to bar their fellow students from entering the classroom on the basis of their race and religion. They committed this act of vile bigotry as a way of protesting a conflict that they knew nothing about and were on the wrong side of, as they openly cheered on terrorists who have repeatedly said that their objective is to commit a genocide against another group of people, including men, women, and children. And lastly, there is the climate cause, which is the only form of environmentalism that Gen Z seems to be interested in. This would at the very least be better than the rest of their causes if it wasn't for the way that they go about fighting for it. Gluing themselves to freeways so that cars end up running for much longer and causing even more pollution, or trying to lasso SUVs on the highway and throwing soup on the Mona Lisa while spray painting Stonehenge have, weirdly enough, not lessened the world's carbon emissions, which are the source of their anxiety. Probably because the Mona Lisa and Stonehenge don't actually emit any carbon. Like I said, you've picked some major losers for your causes, Gen Z. But what I don't put you down for is your search for a cause itself. It is natural for all human beings to seek that out, and for young people to do it most of all. You just seem to be under the very false impression that all of the good causes have already been fought for and won, and that all that's left for you to choose from is the reject pile. I have some amazing news for you. The very best cause in all of human history hasn't yet been won. And you're the first generation in all of human history that has the very real opportunity to take it down. Stick with me and see if I'm overselling this, because I promise you I'm not. I am being completely serious right now. This cause not only makes your loser causes look unambitious by comparison, but it even eclipses the great causes of history that you rightly admire so much, like civil rights. Yes, the biggest cause of all has been left unaddressed. And it is right there waiting for you, Gen Z. if you are actually prepared to really fight and not just to virtue signal. You seem to be mostly unaware of this issue, but that is actually not your fault. You are right about one thing. You are the victims of some things that were beyond your own control. You are the victims of the absolute worst parenting experiment that has ever been conducted en masse in all of human history. To be clear, some of you were raised right and you're shredding it. There are those among you who are some really impressive people. But as a whole, Gen Z is a generation that was raised differently than every other generation that came before it. And that didn't turn out amazing for a large portion of you. You were experimented on. And you are right, that is not your fault. All of the absolute worst parenting ideas were somehow combined, mainstreamed, and embraced. And you were the unfortunate lab rats. Rather than teaching you how to be self-reliant, healthy, and happy, gentle parenting offered you no answers to life. Instead, it just parroted your own questions back at you as though this was some brilliant revolution in communicating. It completely abandoned trying to offer you some useful guidance or the benefit of an adult's experience. Rather than fostering a sense of independence in you and a can-do spirit, a valid degree of confidence in your ability to shoulder life's responsibilities, helicopter parents stripped you of your dignity and left you even more dependent as young adults than most of the previous generations were at 10 years old. Instead of having parents who shouldered their responsibility to raise you and help you to grow, parents who themselves grew up with good guidance under role models like Mr. Rogers, who lovingly simplified the world for them while encouraging them to be open-hearted in it. Your parents turned around and handed you over completely unsupervised to every perverted influencer in the online world that wanted a piece of your mind and a new test subject to socially experiment on. Your teachers went out of their way to emphasize to you every injustice that existed in the world, while also telling you that you had absolutely no agency to do anything about them, encouraging you to believe that you will always be fighting ambiguous ghosts in the ether of the system. They told you that you should recognize all of these injustices and feel miserable about them, while also embracing the fact that these things will always be there to oppress you. That is what the educators that we abandoned you to taught you. To top it all off, this experiment just so happened to coincide with a major revolution in how human beings live their lives. You were the first generation to grow up having amazingly advanced technology right at your fingertips all of the time. This allowed lazy parents to achieve Olympic medalist levels of lazy parenting by simply turning you over to screens unsupervised virtually 24/7. I would encourage you to read Jonathan Haidt's book about the anxious generation, where he breaks down the damage of what this did to your minds while they were forming as children, but he also tells young people that they can actually do something about it to help themselves. Growing up addicted to screens is a big part of why you have so much trouble concentrating and with following through. It is a big cause behind why you have so many mental health struggles. It is a big factor in why you are so subject to groupthink, which is a terrible thing for anyone to fall victim to, but especially for a generation that is admittedly so lost and that feels so utterly hopeless about life. Groupthink will only feed and reinforce all of that negativity. It is the blind leading the blind. And sadly, the world has mostly abandoned you to go on stumbling around in the darkness. They either mock you or despair of you. But that ends today. I've been an aunt since I was 8 years old, and Auntie Becky has some good news for you. This can all turn around. You need to know that you can actually stand on your own 2 feet and make a difference. And if you haven't heard anyone say that to you before and really mean it, well, now you have. You need to know that fighting for something real will actually be worth the effort, because you will be fighting for the most glorious cause that you could ever imagine in your entire existence. Are you ready for this, Gen Z? You, my children, if you so choose, could be the generation that frees the last human slave in existence. After more than 11,000 years of human beings committing this atrocious crime against other members of the human race, you can be the generation that ends slavery. Lincoln freed the slaves in one country. Britain did him one better by shutting down the slave trade for everyone in this hemisphere. Yet because, on the whole, you were abandoned to the worst educators in the history of our country, you seem to think that this fight is over. I have some good news for you, and some bad news for humanity. This fight has barely begun. There are more slaves in the world today, right now, as you are listening to my voice, than there have been at any other time during the whole existence of our species. And no one is doing a damned thing about it. You want to be somebody's hero? Step up to the plate. Your professors in college aren't talking to you at all about this issue, even though they talk to you all the time about the slaves who suffered under similar bondage in the past, hundreds of years ago. Why? That doesn't make any sense unless you consider that this is not only a fight that is actually worth fighting for, this is one that you could actually win. And the people that a lot of you spend your time listening to can't have that. Because if you developed some agency and proved yourselves capable as adults, if you accomplished something important and realized what you could achieve, then you might start to have ideas of your own. And then the power that they get from having their little army of drone followers, which they have raised so carefully to serve them and their agendas, would disintegrate before their very eyes. So let's free 2 groups with 1 stone, so to speak, and stick it to 2 groups of oppressors at the same time, shall we? In the year 1984, Yuri Bezmenov, a Soviet journalist, spoke about the 4 stages used by Marxists when they take over a society. Those stages are demoralization, destabilization, creating a crisis, and then normalizing their new ideology. He said that the first stage takes about 25 years, during which time Marxists bombard a society's young people with so much demoralizing untruth that they become unable to distinguish between the truth and fiction, even when you put incontrovertible evidence right in front of their own eyes. Sound familiar? It's okay to feel angry about people trying to manipulate you, as long as you don't stop there. Stand up and decide to show the very people who have been doing this to you the same thing that the Japanese concluded at Pearl Harbor during the very moment that they appeared to triumph. That all these attacks had actually managed to do, in the end, is to, quote, awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. You are more capable than you know. If you would only take that first scary leap of faith, you would find the whole limitless world of possibilities opening up to you. Yours is a generation that is anxious to have their chance to fight the power. So have at it. Give a giant middle finger to the people who are trying to hold you back, and show them that they failed to keep you down. Take on the most ambitious cause that anyone has ever attempted to take on before. I'm even going to break down for you exactly how you can go about doing that. Bill Maher has been trying to point out some of these things to you for years. He once joked, quote, "The way people talk about slavery these days, you'd think it was a uniquely American thing that we invented in 1619. But slavery throughout history has been the rule, not the exception. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, Romans, the Arabs, British, the early Americans, all the way up through R. Kelly. The word slave comes from Slav because so many Slavic people were enslaved. And they're as white as the Hallmark Channel. Who do you think gathered the slaves from the interior of Africa to sell to slave traders? Africans, who also kept their own slaves. We're a species prone to making others of our species our bitch. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Humans are not good people." End quote. But he didn't tell you how you can change things. Today, I will. Before we talk about how to fix this, let's look at what could be your ambitious new cause. Let's look at just how big the problem really is, so you'll be ready to slay this dragon once and for all. Hundreds of slaves are sold every week in Libya. Cameroon has 800,000 slaves. Niger, Nigeria, Mali, and Mozambique all still have slaves today. The International Labor Organization says that 7 out of every 1,000 Africans today is a slave. That would mean 10 million slaves. There was a total of 11 million victims of the entire transatlantic slave trade during all the years that it existed combined. Where are the protests for today's slaves? Where are the protests for the millions more who are enslaved around the world by human traffickers? Why didn't all of the BLM activists protest when the Houthis started up slavery again in Yemen? The same activists who make their living as race hustlers by condemning the evils of a slavery that went on 150 years ago on moral grounds, which I also condemn, never have a word to say about the people engaging in slavery today. Why is that? If their focus was actually on slavery and its evils, then their first attention would be on condemning those who engage in it today and on freeing those who are actual victims of it right now. But they ignore the present in favor of the past and ignore the slavers of the modern age, many of which are people of color, in favor of the villains from a bygone era. Even then, they are only interested in the white villains of the past, not in the other races who also engaged in slavery and who never voluntarily gave it up. Clearly, their moral outrage is not very sincere. Not when they care less about the plight of people living in slavery at this very moment than they do about the people who lived in slavery 8 generations ago that we can't help now. There's no way to win that fight. And so there is no risk that people might feel empowered by finding out that they are actually capable of achieving a real victory. Gen Z, why are you settling for the bad cause of "from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," which is a call for genocide, by the way, according to the people who came up with that chant, when your cause could be, from each sea to shining sea, every human being shall be free. You can bring to fruition the greatest cause that was ever started by those before you. And as you stand on the shoulders of those who came before you, you can do something even bigger than they did. So, just how many slaves are there in the world right now? The global estimate 4 years ago was that there are 49.6 million slaves worldwide. 28 million of these people are enslaved through forced labor or are born into slavery, while 22 million more are enslaved through the use of arranged marriages against their will. 12 million of these slaves are children. 29 million slaves are in Asia and throughout the Pacific. 7 million of them are in Africa. Another 6 million are in Europe and Central Asia. 5 million are in North and South America, and 2 million people live as slaves in Arab nations. Just 10 nations hold 2/3 of the world's slaves between them. India, North Korea, China, Pakistan, Russia, Indonesia, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Turkey, and the United States. 17 countries have governments who used forced slave labor, enslaving 3.9 million people between them. Slavery is the most prevalent in the Arab world, where there are 10.1 slaves for every 1,000 people. When individual countries are assessed on a case-by-case basis, North Korea is by far the worst offender, where 104.6 out of every 1,000 people are slaves. More than 1 in 10. Turkey is 5th on that list, with 15.6 out of every 1,000 people enslaved. The UAE is almost as bad at 13.4 slaves per 1,000 people. Russia, Afghanistan, and Kuwait sit at 13 slaves per 1,000. Venezuela sits at 9.5. Syria at 8.7. Haiti at 8.2. India, the Congo, and Kosovo at 8. Lebanon at 7.6. Iran at 7.1. Qatar at 6.8. Mexico at 6.6. Sri Lanka at 6.5, Yemen at 6, and here in the United States, 3.3 out of every 1,000 people are slaves. Norway has the best stats in the world at 0.5 slaves per 1,000, while Japan has the best stats in Asia at 1.1. Australia and New Zealand have 1.6 slaves per 1,000, but 4 countries haven't even made human trafficking a crime. Hong Kong, Somalia, North Korea, and Vanuatu. The International Labor Organization says that slavery is still increasing, not decreasing. It has continued to rise significantly over the last 5 years. 10 million slaves were added to the world just between 2016 and 2021, when the world reached 50 million slaves. Even if that number has plateaued and the growth rate has continued at the same level, then we would actually be at 58 million slaves in the world today. Again, during the entire transatlantic slave trade combined, there was a total of 11 million slaves taken from the continent of Africa. Even during the much larger Islamic trans-Saharan slave trade that went on during the same time as the transatlantic slave trade and continued to go on for much longer, 18 million slaves were taken from Africa by them. Both slave trades on both sides of the world, when you add up all their victims over all the years that their slave trade existed, they took 29 million slaves from Africa. And by comparison, In one given year, there are at least 49.6 million slaves in the world as we speak. That is already, on average, nearly one person out of every 150 on the planet who is living right now as a slave. Didn't I promise you an impressive cause? 27.6 million people are victims of human trafficking and end up enslaved that way. And at least 1 million of these victims are right here in the USA. We are one of the largest destinations in the world for modern slavers to sell their trafficked victims. Super Bowl Sunday is the biggest slave auction day for sex traffickers in America each year. We're going to eventually talk about the other forms of slavery besides trafficking and about what we can do to end them. We will also talk about what the members of Gen Z who live in other countries outside the United States can do to help. But first, today, we are going to focus on what the members of Gen Z who are here in the United States can do, starting right now. Before we get into the first step of the first mission in the fight for this massive cause, it is important to point out that the pregame is open to participation by everyone. None of us will be able to succeed at changing a problem this big if most people continue to be unaware that it is a problem that they need to be doing something about. So getting the word out there has to happen before we can even start the fight. This drum needs to be beat until it falls apart. Luckily, Gen Z is fantastic about getting stuff out there on social media. You guys love sharing links and reposting things and making stories go viral. And you rock at it. So use your strengths. I can't do it. I'm awful when it comes to social media. I have no idea what I'm doing. When it comes to tech in general, I'm lucky when I eventually figure out the simple stuff. That's why this can't be my cause. But it can be yours. You can actually light the world on fire with this. So get out there and do it. Do what you do best. Obsess on your keyboards until this is all that people are talking about. You will have to get a momentum going before you can accomplish anything. And no matter what country you are living in, that can be your contribution to getting this movement off the ground. Getting the word out. After today's episode, I will return to my regularly scheduled podcast for a few weeks. So why don't you guys start showing the world what you can do by getting the word out there? And even though no one can possibly make all of that attention happen in just 1 month, I will return to this subject on February 2nd, a week before Super Bowl Sunday 2025. At that point, I will lay out phase 2. So it will be there when you get things moving and you're ready for it. That is, if you actually want a cause to fight for now that you've gotten your wish. The second episode will be about a mission to end slavery that all people in all countries can participate in, and you're going to need them. But as I said, today's mission, after getting the word out, begins with a call to arms for the portion of Gen Z that is living here in the United States. So here we go. Here in America, the conservative estimate is that we have 12 million people here illegally right now. And that does not take into account any of the unknown gotaways, of which there are countless more. But let's just consider the 12 million known illegal immigrants that are here. That's equal to the entire population of 11 states. Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Rhode Island, Montana, Maine, New Hampshire, and Hawaii combined. And that's the conservative estimate. But what does this have to do with slavery? Illegal immigration is how the modern slavers bring their human cargo into the United States to sell them. And migrants are among the most vulnerable people who end up being enslaved and trafficked. With the border absolutely wide open, as it has been for the last 4 years, some of the people who have crossed illegally into our country are neither trafficker nor trafficked. But by going about things in that way, illegally, when they could have easily come across legally, they have provided the necessary cover for the slavers by overwhelming Border Patrol. Agents were spread too thin to find and stop the traffickers, and then free the modern slaves as they came across. We want immigration, but we want every single bit of it to be legal so that we can decide and monitor exactly who we're letting in, so that we can be sure that innocent people aren't being hurt in the process. You can't end slavery if you have illegal immigration. But you can have legal immigration and still end slavery. So let's put out the effort to make people do things the right way. It's worth it, after all, to keep some poor person from living as someone else's slave. One of the problems that every cause fights against is that stories come and go with such rapid-fire speed that it is hard to remember the terrible things that were done when we most need to remember them. So, right now, before we go any further, open the Notes app on your phone and make this note. You'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. Just make the note. One of the very first things that Biden did when he took office was to open the border. The border, when he took office, was the safest border that we had had in 4 decades by the stats. By deliberately opening it, he allowed the cartels to grow and spread in power to a scale that we have never seen before in the world. They now had no impediment to the profits they could make from enslaving as many people as they wanted to. For 4 long years, Biden refused to close the border again, despite seeing the growing devastation and the growth of the cartels. Biden tried to sell us the lie that he did not have the authority to close the border without new legislation being passed, even though his predecessor had done that very thing, and even though he had reopened the border without new legislation. His malicious enabling of the worst human beings on earth, modern slavers, extended so far that as a parting FU to the American people, not to Trump, who it won't affect, but an FU to the American people, who it will affect, in his final weeks in office, Biden began trucking away and selling off the material that the American people had already paid for with their hard-earned money in order to build the border wall. He sold it for pennies on the dollar with the opening bids for an entire section of the wall starting at $5. He did that to us, not to Trump. Now, we working classes who are already struggling under the disastrous economy that he also created will have to pay for that material a second time out of our much-needed incomes, which we are barely getting by with. That is exactly how determined this president was to get his way. He helped slavers continue to enslave other human beings in order to get revenge. Is he just one exceedingly bad apple? Well, none of the other Democrats have tried to stop him, discourage him, or have openly spoken out against him for hurting, again, not Trump, but us. They have completely failed to condemn it. And for the most part, they've even tried to hide it. Biden is deliberately and maliciously wasting our money because he is angry that we voted him out, which is our right to do. Under him, sex trafficking has multiplied by 6 times the amount, based on just the known victims. 23 times the number of people on terrorist watch lists have been caught coming across our border during his 4 years as compared to the 4 years before that. And over 250,000 Americans have died from fentanyl poisoning as a result of this as well. That's over 22 times the number of people who died on D-Day from all of the Allied countries combined. And the cartels are earning around 15 times the amount of money that they were before him. Now take that note and pin it to your calendar on November 7th, 2028, which is when we will have our next election in this country. 4 years from now, you will have forgotten that story. But now you will have a reminder, however big or small a factor it ends up being, in your decision, on the morning that you go out to vote for the next president. When you vote again, it is important to remember exactly whose side the now unrecognizable Democrat Party is fighting on when they won't even condemn Biden for doing something as pointlessly malicious as this. And it is important to understand ahead of time the lengths to which they will go in order to fight you on this, by doing things that will only enable slavery to continue. After all, slave labor is cheap, which makes for a lot of profit. The next thing you can do has to do with the more than 300,000 children who were sent across the border alone by these slavers, which the Biden administration has lost. Some of these lone children were as young as 2 years old, and this administration turned them over to random adults, most of which were not checked out beyond a phone call, during which they claimed to be family members, claims that were not backed up by any proof. These people were supposed to check back in so that we knew that these children were all right. But these people have disappeared with over 300,000 innocent children. Some of them may actually be with their family members, who need to check in and let us know that, so that we do not have to waste our resources looking for them when they could be used to save other children who are in trouble. So why not get busy getting the word out about the need for people to check in? It would take Gen Z no time at all to organize the information, telling people where to go to check in with the government so that we can make sure that these children are happy and healthy, and also finally vet the adults and make sure that these are indeed family members that these children are with. As for the children who are not with family members, who have been trafficked and are being abused right now in our country and abandoned to that life without a second thought, start petitioning the government for photographs of these children. We all know that you can be really annoying when you want to be, so put it to good use. Demand that photos of the children be released to the public, as well as photographs of the people who came to pick them up. The children who are being held in slavery are going to be kept mostly out of sight, so they are going to be nearly impossible to spot. But the slavers who took them still have to function out in the world. They'll be easier to find, and we can all help the police find them if we know who we're looking for. Your generation is very good at keeping an eye out for people who are dangerous and who need to be found. Multiple criminals have been caught that way. Don't look for them so that you can confront them, which you shouldn't do because that is incredibly dangerous. But keep an eye out so that you can send in tips and then let the trained police do the confronting. Like I said, many criminals have been caught this way, and these modern slavers can be caught this way too. But first, we need to know who they are. So the government needs to make that information available to the public so that we can all do our part. And you, Gen Z, are the very people who can provide the pressure that is necessary to make that happen. Light up social media. Organize protests. You love those. Keep them peaceful so that no one has an excuse to discredit the cause. But get out there and do your thing. And just to prove to you that this is an entirely bipartisan cause, I'll point out that I'm saying this to you not knowing when you will hear this message. Biden is still in office for a few more weeks, so you might be protesting against him. More likely than not, by the time you hear this, Trump will be in office, so you'll be protesting to his government. Either way, just get them to release the information. It doesn't matter who you're protesting to. All that matters is that the things that need to be done get done. That's what bipartisan essentially means. It is true that Trump has already promised to close the border, but that will not be the end of things. There are at least 12 million illegal immigrants here right now who need to go back out, starting with the criminals. And if they are simply seeking a new life, then they need to come in legally so that we can thoroughly vet them and be sure about that. They need to come in the right way. Every single immigrant in this country needs to be a legal immigrant if you want to end slavery and free every slave in bondage in this country. Look, you can oppose Trump as a person for the rest of his life if you want to. I'm not going to try to stop you. But surely you're not willing to support slavery just to oppose Trump. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day, people. Anyone who opposes slavery is right, no matter who they are, even if it is Trump. So don't worry about which side he is on, and don't let that determine which side you are going to be on. Fight to end slavery no matter who is doing the same thing and no matter who is not joining in this fight. Fight the fights that need fighting, not the ones that are led by the guy that you like or dislike the most. Trump has put Tom Homan in charge of the border. He is going to be our new border czar. He ran ICE and worked in immigration under 6 different presidents, both Democrats and Republicans. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for George Bush. He worked for Bill Clinton. He worked for George W. Bush. He worked for Barack Obama. And he worked for Donald Trump the last time around. Now he's coming out of retirement again to get the border back under control. Again. The media has aggressively tried to paint Tom as a callous individual who hates immigrants and who is going to go on some sort of a rampage against them. This is because they fight their fights based on how much they hate the person who is leading the opposition. So you'll have to be the grown-ups in the room and show them how to rise above and fight the fights that need fighting. The majority of people have not fallen for the media's slander of Tom, because if they get on the internet, they can look up the videos to see for themselves what he actually said. Dr. Phil went to the border personally to see all that has been going on there, and you can watch that episode on his app, Merritt Street Media. He covered this back in October of 2024, if you want to see for yourself all that's been going on at the border and be as informed as possible. Dr. Phil also recently had Tom on his show, and I'm going to share with you some of what he had to say in his own words. That way you can know exactly what he has planned and decide for yourself whether or not you are willing to support him in doing it. Because this is what it's going to take to start to end slavery. Dr. Phil's audience throughout the election season has been pretty equally split between Democrats and Republicans, leaning slightly more towards Democrats. And yet, the entire room gave Tom Homan a standing ovation from the very start. That tells you exactly how much of the media's power to control the narrative is disappearing. Dr. Phil explained that almost a quarter of the people living in America that were born elsewhere, including naturalized citizens, are here illegally. As many as 853,000 of these illegal immigrants didn't even come over the southern border, according to the Department of Homeland Security. These are people who crossed our northern border from Canada, who has a reckless, unvetted immigration problem in their country as well, and also people who flew here directly with visas for a vacation and who simply never left when they were supposed to. Of the known 12 million illegal immigrants in our country, Only a little over 5 million of them are from Mexico. Over 2 million are from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. So that's a little over half of them from Central and South America so far. Almost 500,000 of them are from India. Over a third of another million are from the Philippines. Another 250,000 are from Venezuela, many of which have been emptied out of their prisons and mental institutions and sent here so that their government doesn't have to deal with their own problems. Another 250,000 of them are from China. Most of these are military-age men. And China doesn't allow its citizens to freely immigrate. It's not like this many people escaped from China. So what's going on there? Over 1/3 people have come from Colombia and Brazil, and these are just the top 10 countries that we have received immigrants from. We have also received large numbers of immigrants from Africa and the Middle East, and from almost every country around the globe. You might ask which of the states end up bearing the burden of feeding and housing most of these illegal immigrants, and which states are suffering from the enormous rise in crime as a result of allowing drug dealers and gang members to sneak in with immigrants, because we have not been vetting anyone. Most immigrants have gone to the largest cities in the states of California, New York, Florida, and Texas. 2 of those are blue states. 2 of them are red ones. Once again, this is not a partisan issue. It is affecting both sides. And both sides need to be working to fix it. After all, they work for us, the American people. Not for themselves. And not even for the people in the rest of the world. They can have compassion for people from other parts of the world, as we all should. But that's not who they work for. They work for the people who elected them to represent us, i.e., Americans. 4% of the American workforce is made up of illegal immigrants, including 30% of agricultural workers and 13% of construction workers. Many of them do pay taxes to the state and federal government through their payroll. Some of them pay property taxes as well. But illegal immigrants also have access to food stamp programs and state-funded health care at the taxpayer's expense, such as Medicaid. They are barred from participating in most federal assistance programs. However, individual states and cities have been offering them additional benefits at the taxpayer's expense. This doesn't just affect the taxpayers who are living in these cities and states, because the federal government has been having to help these cities and states foot the bill. And the money that is being given to them to do that comes from all of us. New York, for example, offers illegal immigrants cash assistance, burial cost assistance, help with emergency cash assistance, free school meals, free housing in historic 5-star hotels, free meals delivered 3 times a day to those hotels, translators, art therapy classes for the children of migrants, etc. New York City alone is spending at least $4.6 billion each year on costs like these for illegal immigrants. What if we could be putting that money towards the national debt instead and lowering the cost of living for all of us? Or even towards helping our homeless veterans? The strain on our healthcare system raises the cost of healthcare for all of us, too. Americans are paying an extra $8,800 per every million illegal immigrants. So that's over $114 million in extra cost through hikes in the cost of our healthcare as a result of the strain on the system. They have to be able to pay healthcare workers for all the extra patients who are uninsured, meaning we get to make up the difference. And that number is based just on the 12 million illegal immigrants that we know are here. That is not counting the cost of the additional several million illegals that are unknown gotaways. And yet the vast majority of Americans still support legal immigration according to all the polls. When done legally, immigration seems to be a net gain, despite some of the initial costs to us. The problem is illegal immigration, most especially because it allows the dangerous cartels to traffic in drugs, crime, and human beings in the form of slaves.
Now, to make that happen, President-elect Trump has tapped Tom Homan, the former acting ICE director, as his new border czar. Tom is about as tough as they come. With decades of experience, he's been tapped to oversee all U.S. borders, including air and sea security, and lead the charge on deporting undocumented immigrants. It's a cornerstone of Trump's immigration plan. But Homan is no stranger to controversy. You'll probably remember his role in the zero-tolerance policy. He's not afraid of a fight, and he doesn't back down when it comes to his beliefs. Take a look at this moment from his 2019 House hearing.
The other voice you're about to hear is Stewardess Barbie AOC.
You recommended family separation.
I recommended zero tolerance.
Which includes family separation.
The same as is with every U.S. citizen parent gets arrested when they're with a child. I was a police officer in New York, and I arrested a father for domestic violence. I separated that father
Mr.
from his
Homan, with
family.
all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're in the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum, go through the port of entry, do it the legal way.
Yep.
The Attorney General of the United States has made that clear.
How can you possibly allow this to happen under your watch? Do you not care?
For you to sit there and insult my integrity and my love for my country and for children, that's why this whole thing needs to be fixed. And you're the member.
We agree on that.
Fix it.
Tom Homan is a straight shooter, a no-nonsense guy who's dedicated his life to law enforcement. Let's give a warm welcome to the new border czar, Tom Homan.
The entire crowd on its feet.
Well, sir, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What am I, chopped liver? I think you got some fans in the house here.
Dr. Phil asked Tom why this issue is so important to him. So let's start there. Why does Tom take the hard stands that he does? What motivates him? Why not go to the horse's mouth?
Because of the tragedies I've seen in my career. I mean, I started as a border patrol agent in 1984. So I wore the uniform. I became an ICE agent, first ICE director. It actually came up through the ranks, right? President Trump put me in that position, who I think is the greatest president of my lifetime, by the way. And the tragedies I've seen, I've talked to young girls as young as 9 that were raped multiple times by members of the cartel. And you get on your knees and talk to a little girl that had everything innocent and pure ripped from her. She'll never be the same. It moves you. I stood in back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead aliens at my feet, including a 5-year-old little boy. They're all in their underwear because they were baking to death. They died in a steel box. And I said in my testimony that one congressman said I didn't care about dying children unless they were white. I stood there and knelt beside that 5-year-old boy and put my hands on him and said a prayer for him because I knew what his last hour of his life was like. No one deserves to die that way, especially children. I've held many dying people. I've held many dead people and talked to a lot of women and children that were sexually assaulted. It all can be prevented if we secure the border. Secure the border saves lives. So, I wake up every day pissed off with what this administration did to the most secure border of my lifetime. But thankfully, we got President Trump coming back, and we're going to secure the border once again to save lives.
Well, I don't know about you, but he sounds like a real inhumane monster to me. Clearly nothing but bad motives there. I would encourage you to think about media spin and set the standard for any of your media consumption that although we are all human and we all make mistakes, anyone caught deliberately lying to you should automatically lose your trust going forward. There are plenty of alternatives out there now, like Dr. Phil's Merit Street Media, and lots of other places to get information direct from the horse's mouth. Known liars don't deserve the benefit of anyone's doubt on their next story. Tom says that he knows he can accomplish all of this because he did it before. Quote, "We had the most secure border ever. Illegal immigration at a 45-year low. Illegal immigration was down 83 to 90%, depending on what time frame you're looking at. So we can do it again, and we have to do it. People say President Trump's policies are inhumane, they're racist, and it's just nothing further from the truth. There's studies done. 31% of women who make that journey through the cartels admit to being sexually assaulted. So we know that number is probably higher, right? When President Trump had illegal immigration at a 45-year low, when 90% less people were coming, how many women weren't being sexually assaulted? How many children didn't drown in that river? How many pounds of fentanyl didn't get into the country to kill Americans? How many women and children weren't sex trafficked? Under Joe Biden, sex trafficking is up 600%. Fentanyl has killed over 250,000 Americans. Record number of people on terrorist watch lists coming across the border. In the Trump administration, we had 13. They got over 300. So President Trump's policy saved lives by the thousands. Most humane policy they've ever seen. Securing the border saves lives, period. End quote. Like I said, you don't have to support Trump. You don't have to like Trump. But even a stopped clock is right twice a day. When he happens to be right on an issue, you should support it simply because it's the right side of the issue. You shouldn't reject it and be on the wrong side of an issue just because you don't want to be on the same side as Trump on even one thing. That would be a really upside-down way to prioritize things. And that's giving someone else way too much power over you. You shouldn't do that, no matter who the person is. Tom says that legal immigrants and naturalized U.S. citizens have nothing to fear from deportations. He has nothing against people that come here legally for a better life. Quote, "Absolutely not. This country is built on immigrants. I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm anti-illegal migration because I understand the whole ugly underbelly of what that means," end quote.
Yeah, because as you pointed out, those that come in are being victimized before they ever get here by the cartels and by those that do the trafficking and get them here. And even after they get here, they owe debts to people that got them here.
So he crossed illegally a few years ago and paid $7,000. And then the two guys inside the vehicle also don't have paperwork. I asked him, what happens if you don't pay the cartels? He says they'll hold you until you pay, or they'll go after the family until you pay.
And they're working that off once they're here, and their families are held hostage and are accountable for those debts back in their home countries.
Absolutely. I mean, trafficking is up over 600%. Over 500,000 children have entered this country through the use of cartels, separated from families. In this administration, who didn't properly vet the sponsors they released them to, they can't find over 300,000 of them. And that's something President Trump's committed to doing, finding these children and saving them.
Let's take a look.
Once again, are you willing to let up to 300,000 children spend their lives as some pedophile sex slave just to be on the opposite side of Trump on every single issue, even when he happens to be right? Under Trump, there were 2,088,618 border encounters during his 4 years in office. During Biden's 4 years, there were 10,825,387, plus 2 million known gotaways. So during Biden's 4 years, that number went up by almost 7 times. Under Trump, there were 1,700,000 609,160 repatriations. Under Biden, that went up to 4,415,920, so nearly triple. During Trump's 4 years, he seized 2,000 pounds of fentanyl. Biden has seized 14,700 pounds of fentanyl during his 4 years, which is enough to kill every single American in the country. And that's not counting all of the fentanyl that got through the border to murder over 250,000 American people. Over 7 times as much fentanyl came into the country under Biden. The DEA says that the amount of fentanyl that has been seized, enough to kill every single American, is no more than 10% of what got through. And as a result, we've had the equivalent of over 22 D-days in this country during the last 4 years because of this man who has been at the helm, whom Democrats wouldn't remove from power even when he became senile. And they tried to get him reelected for 4 more years. Quote, "It's not a coincidence in 4 years of unsecured border we have historic overdose deaths from fentanyl. It's coming across between the ports of entries. But the Border Patrol's overwhelmed. And that's what people need to understand. They want to talk about innocent illegal immigration. They're coming for a better life. I get that. But you need to understand when you overwhelm the system like they've done the last 4 years, most of the Border Patrol's no longer on patrol. They're making sandwiches, changing diapers. They're making hospital runs. They're dealing with humanitarian crises. So when you pull 70% of agents off their national security duty, that's when they move the fentanyl in to kill Americans. That's when they move the 600% increase in sex trafficking. That's when the bad people come. And look, 2 million people paid more to get away. Why did 2 million people pay more to get away? Because they could have paid less. Get to the border, cartel's job's done. Turn yourself into a green uniform, get processed, get released within 24 hours, get a free airline ticket to the city of your choice, get a free hotel room, get 3 meals a day, get free medical care, and in 90 to 120 days, get work authorization, which is the very reason you came here. Why did 2 million people pay more to get away? Because they didn't want to be vetted. They didn't want to be fingerprinted. That should scare the hell out of everybody. It scares the hell out of me. How many of those came from a country sponsoring terror? End quote. Under the ridiculously wide open border of the Biden administration, there are legal ports of entry everywhere. Yet the cartels flooded people across in between those ports of entry so that the Border Patrol has to stop patrolling and go assist these people, leaving gaps. These people who have crossed in between the legal ports of entry still have the option to do so without any consequence as long as they go up to a green uniform. They will still get all of the goodies that Tom listed, despite entering the country illegally. Only the agents in brown uniforms will turn them around and send them home for crossing the border illegally. The cartels know all of this. They tell this to the people they're bringing across. We know that because they tell us that they know this. The only reason to cross illegally and then avoid Border Patrol and pay the dangerous cartels more to help you get away from the green shirts with the goodie bags is if you've got something really bad to hide. Quote, they pay more to get away. And that scares the hell out of me because I don't know how many terrorists cross this border under Joe Biden. But someday we're going to find out, and it's going to be a bad day for America. Even the FBI director agrees with me that the southwest border is the biggest national security vulnerability this nation has seen, end quote. We know that over 300 people whose names were on terrorist watch lists were caught crossing the border. 183,055 people were caught who had pending criminal convictions and charges against them in other countries outside of the people ICE was not allowed to arrest. And another 178,508 people with pending criminal convictions and charges against them in other countries were actually allowed to be removed by ICE because of the seriousness of those charges. We saw the kind of serious criminals with known convictions who were allowed to stay in this country, like the man who killed Laken Riley. So that should tell you the type of charges against the people that actually did get removed. And those numbers only include the people who were stopped and caught. Who knows how many millions more got away from pursuers or came in without us ever knowing about it. And we have no idea where those unbelievably dangerous people are right now or what they're doing to the other people around them. Quote, as far as the gotaways, there's no footprint on these people. They weren't fingerprinted. They weren't vetted. There's no release documents. So these are people we're going to have a hard time finding, but we'll find them, end quote. And like I said, you can help Tom find these people, Gen Z. Not by putting yourselves in danger and being vigilantes, but by demanding that the information be made public so that you can increase the number of eyes on the streets and report what you find to the people who are trained to handle this. You could literally be the guy that prevents the next 9/11. This is a clip of some politicians who are promising to oppose Tom's deportation of illegal immigrants.
We will be very aggressive, both with bullhorn, with legal action. If it's contrary to
Governor
our
Phil
values,
Murray
we will
of New
fight
Jersey.
to the death.
Are you willing to go to jail over this?
I think there are thoughtful ways to solve this problem. If they want to focus on
Mayor Mike
violent
Johnson,
criminals, we would be happy to help
Denver,
support,
Colorado.
Pursuing, arresting, and deporting them. What we're not going to do is support deploying the 101st Airborne into American cities to pull 10-year-old kids out of their classrooms in handcuffs. I think that is immoral, that's unconstitutional, and that's un-American.
Nobody's proposing that.
Well, that was some of the reactions from Democrats across the country. Democratic leaders and immigration advocacy groups are planning a major showdown against President-elect Donald Trump's proposed mass deportation plan. It's shaping up to be one heck of a battle that Trump's new border czar, Tom Homan, says he's ready for it. What happens January 21st? Where do you start?
Well, there's three rails we'll start the first day. Number one, we're going to secure the border. Number two, we're going to run the deportation operation. And number three, they'll look for these 300,000 kids. We'll find them too. President Trump's been clear. We're going to prioritize public safety threats and national security threats first because they pose the most danger to this nation. So day one, we're going to be looking for these public safety threats, arresting them, detaining them, and deporting them. And if these sanctuary city mayors don't want to help, then get the hell out of the way because we're coming. We're doing it.
Tom went on to add, quote, I grew up in a family of cops. My grandfather was a cop. My dad was a cop. And we're in the situation now where the left thinks those who enforce the laws are the bad guys, those who broke the laws are the victims. Well, we're going to change that after January 20th. End quote. Tom says that it is a fact that countries like Venezuela took the dangerous criminals in their prisons out and sent them here because of the open border. And they have refused to allow us to send them back. Quote, Venezuela to this day, they're pushing back on taking return of those criminals. So President Trump already realizes he has to give a mandate to Venezuela saying, you will take these people back or you'll face consequences. End quote. We have our own criminals to deal with. We cannot be the dumping ground for other nations' criminals too. Every country has to be responsible for dealing with its own criminal population. They cannot expect the United States to take in other countries' problems. And if they are unreasonable enough to expect that, we're still going to say no. We've all seen the footage of the apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado that have been entirely taken over by violent Venezuelan gangs. And the city has allowed this to go on, completely abandoning its citizens to this hostile takeover of their homes. These gangs recently took other tenants in that building hostage, held them captive, beat them, tied them up, pistol whipped them, and even stabbed them before releasing them. Is the media still going to argue that we shouldn't worry because it's just a few apartment complexes in our country that have been hostilely taken over by dangerous foreign gangs? Quote, there's a gang problem in that building. In that entire neighborhood, there's a gang problem. I was there. They're putting communities at great risk. But now they've got a problem January 20th because my gang is bigger than their gang. I expect some to scatter. I expect some are going to be a problem. I hope to God I'm wrong, but there's going to be some violence. These are heavily armed people. And I'll pray every day for the men and women of ICE to do a good job and go home safe to their families every day. But we're not walking away from the danger. We can't. We've got to make this country safe again. I'm sick and tired of young girls being raped and killed by people who are not supposed to be here. President Trump is committed to removing these public safety threats. I'm committed to removing them. So regardless of where they go, they can run and hide, but we're going to find them, and they're going to be deported. Look, the law clearly says when you come to our border and enter illegally, if you don't have proper documentation to enter the country, you shall be detained. Shall. Not maybe. Not let's think about it. Not let's create a CBP-1 app and bring them in through the back door. You shall be detained. That's the difference between President Trump and Joe Biden. President Trump took that serious. This administration didn't. So that's what we're going to do January 20th. You come here, hopefully you have the Remain in Mexico program back in very fast, but if not, you'll be detained. And we'll find the beds to detain you in, but you're not going to be released into the public. And we're certainly not going to release people who can't vet properly. That's why so many criminals cross the border. The secretary can say all day long, well, they're all vetted before they're released. We don't have criminal data from El Salvador. We don't have criminal data from Venezuela. So you say you vet them through NCIC. So if they've ever been arrested here, yeah, we'll know about it. But if they've never been arrested here before, there's no footprint here. We don't know who these people are. That's why they need to be detained, end quote. Crossing the border illegally is a crime. It is a misdemeanor. And that is a deportable offense. The people doing this know that. They are making the choice to go about things in that illegal way. If they choose to do things legally, there won't be any problem. And we do have the right to demand that as the price of entry. Quote, if they're from Mexico, we can do an expedited removal and put them back within hours. When I was a Border Patrol agent, you could process an alien from Mexico and return him within 45 minutes for everything. But if you're from a foreign nation other than Mexico, then we have to detain them while we work on travel documents. Let's take Venezuela, for example. You got to get Venezuela to agree to take them. They have to send you travel documents. They have to accept that, yeah, this person's a national of our country, a citizen of our country. Then we've got to make flight arrangements. So everybody we arrest, the vast majority, you have to detain a few days while we work out these details. El Salvador issues a travel document for their citizens. We have to pay for those travel documents, believe it or not, under this administration. So we got to look at those things too. These countries need to adhere to the rules that have been established over decades that you need to take your citizens back, end quote. The problem really is this administration. They have enabled traffickers and slavers to victimize innocent people, and they have gone on enabling them to do so long after the consequences of their policies became obvious. We've compared the previous Trump administration to the Biden administration, but let's compare it to the Obama administration. Under Trump, there were approximately 2 million deportations during his 4 years. Under Obama's first 4 years, there were 3.2 million deportations and another 2.1 million during his second 4 years. So both former presidents were both doing about the same. Tom was in charge under both of those men. That was him doing the deportations under a Democrat like Obama and under Trump. Yet the media acts like bringing back Obama's guy is monstrous and dangerous. In fact, President Obama gave Tom a Presidential Rank Award for the job he did under his administration. It is the Biden administration that is the aberration here. It is this administration that is acting more like a crime family than a government, and has enabled the worst of humanity to do the worst things imaginable to other innocent human beings. Tom says, quote, "I don't care about politics. I don't care what people think about me, never have. I'm going to do the job. It should be a nonpartisan issue." Let's forget about illegal immigration for a minute. When you cause a crisis as big as the Biden administration has done, now we're talking about 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl, 600% increase in sex trafficking, a record number of aliens that have died crossing this border, historic number, almost 4,000 have died crossing this border under Biden administration. We're talking about enormous suspected terrorist threats coming at record numbers. This isn't just about illegal immigration. When you cause a crisis this big, it causes all those bad things to happen. So when you talk about terrorism or 250,000 dead Americans, this should be a nonpartisan issue, I would think. And Republicans, Democrats, and independents, we all agree on this. But the left still doesn't get it. And I find that troubling. I've seen so many tragedies in my lifetime, some of those still keep me up at night. While you and I are talking right now, women are being raped by criminal cartels on the border. While we're talking right now, a child will die tonight. And I'm done with it. I'm sick of it. A secure border saves lives. And I can't wait to January 20th when President Trump is back in power and we secure this border. Here are some of the people on the far left, like what he's talking about, that don't seem to understand the reality going on here.
Without objection, it is passed.
Los Angeles unanimously passed a sanctuary city ordinance on Tuesday, which would protect immigrants living there.
We know that women should be able to report domestic violence and seek justice. Kids should be able to go to school, and families should be able to go to public libraries without the fear that doing so would tear their families apart.
Tom responded, quote, "I find it amazing that any elected mayor or governor would push back. The president's been very clear. We're going to concentrate out of the gate on public safety threats. What mayor or governor does not want public safety threats taken out of the community? So again, help us or get out of the way." And I've been clear, these politicians need to read Title 8, United States Code 1324, Section 3. It says, if you knowingly conceal or harbor an illegal alien from an ICE officer, it is a felony. To impede a federal law enforcement officer is a felony. So don't cross that line. We've got a strong AG coming in Pam Bundy, and we will present these prosecutions, so don't test us. If you don't want to help, stay out of the way. But I would think we'd all be on the same page. Let me tell you something about sanctuary cities. Sanctuaries are sanctuaries for criminals only. That guy said, we want victims and witnesses of crimes to feel comfortable coming to the police, and so we don't want to send a message that we're working with ICE. That is crap. Victims and witnesses of crimes don't want the bad guys released back in the community. That's just common sense. It puts the community at risk. And like I said before, if you force us into the community, we're going to find the bad guy. There's probably others we're going to find, which means they're going to be arrested too. So by them putting up roadblocks and being a sanctuary city, they're going to get the exact results that they don't want. More ICE officers in their neighborhoods. It's much safer. And why won't you give us access to somebody you locked in a jail cell? Because obviously he's a public safety threat. And when you're done with them, let us have them. Because then we will not only remove them from the community, we'll remove them from the country so that he can't reoffend. Look at re-citizen rates, for God's sakes. They're going to release him back into the immigrant community. He's likely to reoffend in the immigrant community. How is that protecting the immigrant community? MS-13 thrives on citizens from El Salvador. Let us protect the American citizens, but let us protect the immigrant community. Give us the bad guy, end quote. Dr. Phil also brought up the threat that he has been repeatedly voicing of the Chinese immigrants who are crossing the border, most of which are military-age men. And common sense would say that they have their government's permission to be here. They are buying up pockets of land in this country in very strategic locations. It is not dispersed around randomly. It is in very specific, concentrated areas. These are large amounts of land that have been bought up, and most of these purchases surround our major military bases. How do we protect against that kind of a potential national security threat? How do we protect against an organized attack on our energy grid? Why are non-American citizens even allowed to buy up land here? To own a business here? Yeah. But to own the land? You could solve that real easy by writing a law, and we should. America is not for sale. To own American land, you should have to be an American citizen. It's that simple. Quote, this is a huge national security threat to us. It's closer to 60,000 Chinese under the Biden administration. 60,000 Chinese males, mostly military age, do not leave China without the coordination and approval of the Chinese government. That just don't happen. So this is a coordinated national security vulnerability that the Chinese government is involved in. That's my true belief. That is a huge national security vulnerability. This administration did nothing to China about creating the precursors that make the fentanyl to sell to the cartels. Nothing. They've done nothing about the Mexican cartels. President Trump is committed to taking on the Mexican cartels because they've killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world combined, end quote. By now you've probably figured out this is happening. It is going to take place despite the small minority of people who don't like it. The vast majority of people on both sides of the aisle support this. The Texas Land Commissioner has already donated 1,400 acres of state land to start building the necessary deportation facilities, and she says more land is on the way. Texas has already started building a border wall on some of the land with the aim to finish a mile every week. She says, quote, Texas has been standing in the gap while the Biden administration has abdicated its duty to protect our border. And so our offer was simply this. If we have something that's of use to you, if there's a way to help get those violent criminals off our soil who are raping and murdering our sons and daughters, we want to be a part of that, end quote. Tom acknowledged, quote, Governor Abbott has done more to secure this border than anybody in this administration. Every ounce of fentanyl his troopers seize is less overdose deaths across the nation. Every person they arrest for trespass, at least they vet them, they fingerprint them, make sure they're not releasing a known terrorist. So God bless him. He's done more than anybody in the Biden administration to secure the border and protect America, end quote. And I would remind everyone that the Biden administration took Governor Abbott to the Supreme Court saying that if Biden didn't choose to enforce the border laws, which he is legally obligated to enforce, then a governor's hands should be tied when it comes to the governor being allowed to enforce the law. Biden even tore down part of the wall that the state of Texas had paid to build, opening the border up even further in a petty attempt to hogtie those who were actually trying to help stem the humanitarian crisis.
When we talk about this, we talk about numbers, and numbers can take the humanity out of it because you're talking about saving lives. It's important to realize they're being victimized in getting here. They're being victimized by these cartels. Let's take a look at some video of a 2-year-old migrant girl recently found alone at the Texas border. Now, the girl, the Salvadorian, was among 200 migrants with 60 unaccompanied minors.
Venezuela, mamá.
Did you come by yourself?
Sí. ¿Qué tantos años tienes?
How old are you?
2 años.
2 years old?
¿No vienes con tu mamá y tu papá?
Did you come with your parents?
No. ¿Venezuela?
By yourself?
¿Para dónde vas, mamá?
Where are you going? With my mom and dad? Where are they?
Estados Unidos?
United States.
Okay.
Standing there holding a Post-it note. A 2-year-old girl alone at
This
the
is
border.
a 2-year-old child that shows up with a Post-it note. How did she get there?
Obviously, her parents paid the criminal cartel, have her smuggled in. Thank God she's alive, because too many of these young people perished. Hopefully she wasn't sexually assaulted by some animal in the cartel, because that happens all the time. But you know, she'll eventually be released. They'll find her parents and deliver it to the parents. What I want to happen, when the parents come forward, we'll process them too. And when that little girl goes to immigration court, the parents can be standing shoulder to shoulder with her, because that's parenting 101, in my opinion. And we'll deport them all together as family. This should not happen. We got to put a stop to this. It's just madness. I don't know who put a 2-year-old in the hands of a criminal cartel to be smuggled across the border. It's so dangerous. The river alone, the river's taking thousands of lives. The desert, thousands of lives. I don't understand it, but we're going to put an end to it.
And like you said, that cartel had 60 children that they dropped at the border. She was part of a group of 60 little children left completely to the mercy of these cartels. And even if the cartels were trying, like decent people, to keep these children alive, which they obviously are not because they're cartels, how many, even them doing the best they can, how many of those kids drowned in the river, get lost in the desert? That's aside from the ones that they sexually assault. This is insane, and it's got to be stopped, like he said. So before we start summing things up, I want to point out that Tom is far from the only humane voice with the Border Patrol. Border Patrol and the local police in border states go out into the middle of nowhere, into the middle of rugged deserts to intercept these illegal immigrants. They also go in with supplies that very often save the lives of migrants. They carry in water, food, clothing, and medication because they very often find people who have gotten lost and who have been left behind to die in those deserts. These law enforcement officers aren't a bunch of heartless thugs. They're putting their lives on the line in order to save people who have crossed dozens and dozens of miles of desert, a lot of times as drug mules, traveling with some of the most dangerous people on the planet, who don't hesitate to leave even a child behind to die an awful death, and have. When Dr. Phil pointed that out, Tom replied, quote, "I appreciate you saying that because that's not talked about enough. Look, when I was a Border Patrol agent, most of the time I didn't eat my lunch. I gave it to an alien I arrested who hadn't eaten in days. Because I can eat later that day, and he hasn't eaten. Men and women of Border Patrol, they're the only humane thing on that border. The men and women wearing green, they're patriots. They're the finest 1% this country has, and they bring toys from their own children to some of these camps so these children have something to play with. They take sicknesses home to their families, whether it's measles, chickenpox, TB. I mean, they deal with this every day. The most important thing I want everybody to understand, they're the only humane thing on this border. They're moms and dads too. They're sons and daughters too. They don't hang their heart on the wall when they wear that uniform. A lot on the left like to push that message. They're racist and they're a bunch of stormtroopers. It's just ridiculous. The men and women on the Border Patrol, God bless them. I wore that uniform. They save thousands of lives every year. The men and women on Border Patrol are great patriots. And I want to remind people, I think at the last count under this administration, I think they've got close to 40 suicides. The highest level of suicide in any law enforcement agency, federal, state, or local. And why is that? Talking to little girls that were raped multiple times. Seeing the devastation on the border certainly had to weigh on them. So these men and women have taken a toll the last 4 years. I was down there last week. Their spirits are picking up because they know the rescue is coming and they're going to get to do the job again. So if you see a Border Patrol agent, just thank them because they haven't been thanked in 4 years, end quote. One of the men who works for the seriously undermanned Border Patrol is a former Marine named Josh Olteski. 3 years ago this month, he was alone in the mountains when he was attacked by 2 migrants who tried to take his gun. 1 round went off before the gun misfired. So they proceeded to cut his throat with his own knife. He continued to fight them on his own for 8 minutes before backup arrived. Both of the migrants were apprehended, but one got no jail time for what he did. The other got 7 years. 7 years in prison is not the sentence you get for trying to cut the throat of one of our federal agents, especially if you're here illegally. That agent is an American. He's one of us. A foreign criminal is not. That is offensive to the sacrifice made by all the heroes like this young man everywhere who served his country and has continued to serve his people to this day. These Border Patrol agents are often out in the middle of nowhere, miles away from any help when they need it. They are often doing this in the middle of the night. They don't know if the person they spot and go up to is a migrant looking for a job who's been left to die in the desert and needs their help, or if he's one of the most dangerous members of a drug cartel who will take their life in the blink of an eye without any remorse. And yet they continue to show up and do the job in order to try to protect the innocent, both among the migrants and us. Josh's brother, Chris Olteski, is another hero, another Marine, who now serves his country as part of the local sheriff's department. Chris was throwing spikes in the road to stop the dangerous pursuit of someone crossing the border, which he routinely has to deal with. He wanted to stop the careening vehicle before it reached the populated city in order to avoid yet another fatal crash that would claim the lives of innocent Americans. The vehicle was headed toward the iconic tourist attraction of Tombstone, Arizona, of Wyatt Earp fame, as well at well over 100 miles per hour. This vehicle had already been involved in a chase earlier in the day. It had been stopped again and was fleeing for the second time when Chris made the decision to throw down spikes in order to stop this escalating situation by a clearly determined criminal. While Chris was gathering the spikes back up so that the pursuit could continue, he fell off a bridge to the pavement 17 feet below. He broke his femur, the largest bone in the human body. He broke his pelvis, his right elbow, and his left wrist. As a result of those injuries and the complications he suffered, he went on to have 6 strokes. Chris doesn't know how long he laid there before he was found. For the next 10 days, he lived in what he calls the darkness. A Border Patrol agent that worked with his brother eventually found Chris after an NBC crew who was covering the pursuit flagged him down. Both of these men are still fighting the fight they believe in to save lives. These are the type of people that the media takes so much glee in demonizing as racist thugs without any hearts. And the thing that these brothers wanted to make clear is that their story is just a representation of the struggles that are faced by everyone that serves with them. These are the people who pick up the bodies that are created by other people's politics. They want people to understand that these are the stories not just of these two brothers, but of everyone who is working so hard to make a real difference in this world, not just posting hashtags about it. So let their standards for doing something good in this world inspire you to follow suit.
Tucson Sector Border Patrol reports arresting an undocumented immigrant after he illegally re-entered the country near Casa Grande. Now, this is a picture of Gilberto Garcia posted today on Border Patrol's X account. Border Patrol says Garcia is now charged with illegal re-entry after being arrested last Tuesday. He was previously convicted of sexual crimes against children in 2018 before being deported back to Mexico.
Sheriff Mark Lamb says that they've gotten more in interaction from one day with Tom, a man who has actually worked the job and who understands what they're facing, than the amount of interaction that they've gotten with anyone in the federal government in the last 4 years, including the previous border czar, Kamala Harris. He says that alone feels like a weight off their chest. Sheriff Mark Daniels says that he's known Tom and worked with him for years, and that Tom's message has never changed. He says he's not interested in politics, just in reality. He says that in all the years he's known him, Tom has always stood up for one idea, the American people and the American dream. And that has not changed to the left or to the right with political trends. He has served under 6 different presidents. They have been made up of both Republicans and Democrats, both of which have praised the job he did. So clearly the controversy surrounding his reappointment is artificial. Tom says that he goes to the border to talk with the people there as the border czar, unlike his predecessor Kamala Harris, who couldn't be bothered to do the same thing. In Tom's case, that's because he cares about the issue personally. He started off as a police officer in New York in 1983. He's been a Border Patrol agent. He knows what it is to face the problems these men and women face. He knows the administration side, too, from working for ICE. He was the very first ICE director who had come up through the ranks and has been on the front lines. And during his time running ICE, he never asked the people working under him to do anything that he had not done while working their job. He cares because in the 34 years he's been working for immigration, he has seen a lot of tragedies. Quote, I've seen a lot of dead people. I've seen a lot of children who've suffered. I've seen dead children. I've talked to little girls as young as 9 who were raped multiple times by the criminal cartel as part of their passage. It changed me forever. At one point it broke me. It broke my heart. When I worked with President Trump, we succeeded in having the most secure border of my lifetime. And now I wake up every day pissed off because we got an administration who came in and unsecured the most secure border on purpose. Not by accident, not by mismanagement, but by design. And when they did that, I knew exactly what was going to happen. More children would die. More women would be sexually assaulted. More known suspected terrorist threats were going to get into the country. More sex trafficking is going to happen. More death overall. And it happened under Joe Biden's administration. We've got a record number of aliens dying crossing the border. A historic number, almost 4,000. We've got 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl coming across the border. 600% increase in sex trafficking of women and children. They've lost track of 300,000 children who were smuggled in this country and they released. I guarantee you many of them are living with pedophiles and in forced labor. Now, I'm honored that President Trump asked me to come back for the second time from retirement to do this job and work with patriots like this who've been fighting on the front lines under numerous administrations. And they bore the brunt on the last 4 years of doing this on their own. They've been abandoned by this administration. Well, guess what? President Trump has got their 6, I've got their 6, and they've got my 6. And that's a beautiful thing to say in the world of law enforcement, where you've got each other's 6. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. When you grow up in a small town where everybody's milking cows, and you fast forward, I'm standing in the back of a trailer with 19 dead people at my feet who baked to death. baked to death. All the ones that died are in their underwear trying to get some relief from the heat. Steel box, black, no lights, no air, no water. And when I went to that crime scene and I keyed on a 5-year-old little boy wearing Batman underwear, the same Batman underwear that my son had, my 5-year-old son, and you think about the tragedy of that life being lost, you think about what that little boy went through, how he suffered. No one should suffer like that. And it broke me because I know it can be fixed. I know it can be prevented. When you have a secure border and people aren't making that journey, they're not dying. Think about the little girl, the numerous ones that died. Laken Riley, that little girl fought for 18 minutes. She didn't want to die. She's fighting for every breath. She tried to call 911. That got stopped. This little girl panicked in terror, fighting for every minute of her life, killed by someone that's not supposed to be here. And I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. Now, that incident back in the tractor trailer changed me forever. And I'm a tough guy, but I had to get help. When you deal with so much tragedy, it wears on you. People want to know why I'm so emotional and I'm so hardcore on this, because I'm sick and tired of burying children and having women being raped. And I'm sick of tired of talking to angel mom and dads whose children were murdered by someone that's not supposed to be here. I'm sick and tired of all the fentanyl deaths and all these parents that have suffered the loss of their child. And everybody wants to beat up on Trump's family separation. No one wants to talk about the separation that occurs 1,000 times more by a parent burying their child. That's separation. This isn't about being a badass. This isn't about being the border god or anything as I've read in the paper. This is about saving lives. Every Border Patrol agent that wears that uniform, they're a mom and dad too. They don't hang their heart on the hook when they go to work. They save thousands of lives every year. These men save thousands of lives every year. And I'm tired of the chaos and the death. And I'm going to do everything I can to fix it because it's the right thing to do for this country. The right thing to do for the men and women who put a Kevlar vest on every day, put a gun at their hip, and do the job that Americans want them to do. When I was ICE director, we spent nearly $1 billion on health care. The left media attacks ICE detention centers all the time. I dare any state or federal or local facility to compare their detention standards to ICE detention standards. Anybody can go to ice.gov, look up PBNDS 11, Performance-Based National Detention Standards. I think most taxpayers would be pissed off on how much money we spend on detention standards. As a matter of fact, there are sheriffs across the country that backed out of our contracts because they could not afford those detention standards. These people are well taken care of. They want to talk about the deaths in custody when we have people in custody that die, whether it's a heart attack or something that's unexpected. Our deaths in custody are a fraction of every other facility in the country. But they'll earmark, well, ICE lost 14 people in custody this year, died in custody. ICE facilities are sometimes the first vaccinations children get. Sometimes it's the first time they've ever seen a doctor. Matter of fact, the medical professionals of ICE, they save thousands of lives because they find something that they didn't even know we had. When 90% less people are coming, how many women aren't being raped? How many children didn't drown in the river? How many Americans didn't die from fentanyl? Because when immigration is down 90%, Border Patrol is 100% on the line and vigilant. But under this administration, they're overwhelmed with millions of people coming across the border, where the majority of Border Patrol agents, not some, a majority of Border Patrol agents were pulled off their duties on the border. National security duties to make sandwiches, change diapers, make baby formula, make hospital runs, make bus runs, and process this humanitarian crisis. At the same time they're doing that, the cartels took advantage. They created gaps. They send these groups to one area knowing that Border Patrol is going to seize on that opportunity. Then they create gaps in the system. That's when they move the fentanyl. That's when they move the bad guys. That's when they move the 2.2 million that don't want to be caught. Having a secure border saves lives just because less people are coming. Less people are in harm's way. The open border caused the cartels to take control. The criminal cartels in Mexico control our southern border. They decide what comes in, who comes in, where it comes in, and when it comes in. You talk to any Border Patrol chief, and I've talked to most of them, they'll tell you that they have lost operational strategic control of the border. One chief patrol agent used to turn when there was heat in the moment, when the numbers were 10,000 a day. He says, "Tom, this is Broken Arrow." He says, "I can't contain what's coming across. I'm not going to get 10%. You think 100 family groups, 200 family groups show up at the same place, the same time by coincidence? No. The cartels will send a large group like that to overwhelm the Border Patrol, and they create operational gaps. Border Patrol under Biden has arrested people from 181 different countries. That's almost every country in the world. Some of those countries are sponsors of terror. They've arrested 300 people on terrorist watch lists just on the border under these 4 years. How many of those 2.2 came from a country sponsoring terror? If you think it's zero, you're a moron. Something's coming. America's lack of security hasn't just affected Americans. What we've allowed to happen here has caused the cartels to grow and spread into 54 countries, selling drugs, killing people, and trafficking in modern slaves because of the power and financial resources that they were able to gain through the crisis that was deliberately created at our southern border by this administration. Apart from the people who die from fentanyl, there are the families that are devastated by the hopeless addictions that are being created in record numbers. It is carnage on a scale that we've never seen before. Just look at some photos of Camden, New Jersey. It looks like a dystopian zombie apocalypse, and that's not an exaggeration. And the plight of these children who are being abused in forced labor and used sexually by the very worst perverts imaginable, who literally break their little bodies. How can we let this go on another day? To do so in the name of compassion is revolting.
Losing over 100,000 Americans a year to fentanyl. And the ones that don't die, these families are being crushed by the effects of fentanyl in their homes and in their families and in their communities. You talk about the people that are being abused by the cartels. Tom just mentioned them. You talk about the children that are being lost and used as pawns, the women that are being raped, the people that are being left for dead in the desert. We, the sheriffs, are the ones that go pick those people up in conjunction with our partners at Border Patrol. We're out there using our helicopters, our resources to pick people up that should have never have been in the desert on a 120-degree day. They should have never been there because we should have done our job in the first place. But they're being taken advantage of by bad policies and criminal organizations that have zero care for human life.
Dr. Phil, the number one responsibility of any elected official, from the president all the way down to a mayor or a sheriff, a community leader, a national leader, anybody that wears a badge, is quality of life. That's what we do every day, is to go out and sustain that quality of life that people expect. And they're blind to a lot of things we do every day. And for somebody to turn a blind eye to that, or somebody takes an oath of office to say, I'm going to protect your quality of life, and protect the rule of law in this country, but turn their back on it, that's gross negligence. If I did that, I promise you, I'd either be prosecuted or I'd be kicked out of office. And that's what's happened here. I truly believe the will of the people says we've seen enough, we've heard enough, we can't take this no more. And that's why we have the change.
So, to sum up, there are plenty of worthwhile causes out there that need fighting. And the biggest one is to fight until every last person that is living in slavery in this world is finally free. Job one for everyone everywhere is to make sure that everyone else knows what a big problem this is by helping to beat the drum and get the word out. Abandon your protests where you fly flags for genocidal killers like Hamas. Stop throwing soup on the Mona Lisa. She's not doing anything to you. Stop gluing yourself to freeways so that people can sit there with their cars running even longer than they would have otherwise, instead of getting to where they were going and turning them off. And instead of all that hollow nonsense, get excited about fixing a real problem. That is, if you actually mean what you say and you truly want to make a real difference in the world. Here in the United States, start doing everything you can do to end the problem here by helping the police and Border Patrol and ICE to find these missing children. Get organized and demand that the government release the information that will enable us to keep an eye out. And then keep your eyes open so you can send in tips so these people can be found and saved. If you really want to devote your life to making a big difference, then join the Border Patrol. They're seriously understaffed, and they need all the help they can get. That's just phase 1 of the biggest cause you could ever have hoped to fight for in your life. So be sure to come back on February 2nd to hear about phase 2, which is something everyone can participate in worldwide. You can find out more about modern slavery at ILO.org, which is the International Labor Organization, or at walkfree.org. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast, and if you enjoyed it, please like and follow, because that's how these things become successful. And I hope you come back next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.